What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over how you can swap things between game modes. So what I mean by that is if I go into Versus, I probably shouldn't have hitboxes and hurtboxes on and all these other things like maybe frame data and stuff like that. The game should just kind of play regularly without any sort of extra stuff that we only need in certain game modes, such as the practice mode. And thinking of it now, I probably should have done this for the input stack as well on the HUD. But basically, you can see how I'm playing normally with no hitboxes, hurtboxes shown. And then if I pause my game and go to the main menu and go to practice mode, although the menus themselves will probably be a little bit different, for now I'm leaving them the same, just entering the mode. And you can see I have hurtboxes on, and I'll also have hitboxes on as well. And so now I can still go back and forth between the two, do everything that I can normally do. However, I have all the correct logic for the correct mode. And this actually is not done by switching game modes, but rather I'm just switching what we display based on the game mode's data. And there's a reason for that. The game mode itself actually is a little misleading. So the term game mode, most people, at least most people that I've spoken to about this, think that game mode refers to, okay, I want to play Slayer or Capture the Flag if I'm referring to Halo, or Team Deathmatch, or gun game if I'm referring to Call of Duty. Whatever mode, but just a lot of times game mode is thought of like that because that is called a game mode. In Unreal, a game mode can't be changed on the fly. You can't just switch your game mode. You actually have to switch it to a specific game mode for a specific level, which you could do, like for example, in Mortal Kombat's Crypt, you kind of walk around in first-person view. Well, that could be an entirely different game mode because you load the Crypt level. You're never going to fight in that level. And so we could use a different game mode for that entirely. However, in a case like this where we just want to change specific things about the game, what's shown on the screen, what each player can do, these sort of things, then that should actually be all within the same game mode. So that's why I call this the base game mode. We can make other game modes off of it and, determine that functionality. But for our base game mode, we should be able to go to these different options. And instead of having to manually go in and toggle it on and off like I've done every time, we can go and just pick the correct mode versus practice and see it right there. All right, so to do this, it's going to be pretty simple today. I figured we'd take it easy after that charge attack episode, which took up a lot of time and effort. We are going to add some stuff to our base game instance. But before we get started, this is episode 96, I believe. So if you'd like to get caught up on the series, we've done a lot and we still have a long way to go. I'll leave the link to the playlist right here. This is for all the episodes of the Fighting Game Tutorial series, as well as some additional ones that I've made that are useful for things like data tables and blend spaces and things like that. Otherwise, I'll leave a simple video here for the main menu if you'd like to see how I made that, since that's mainly what we're going to be using to determine these things today. Alright, so first things first, like how we set up our level 2 load for the game instance where we knew what level was coming next for level streaming, we're going to do a similar thing to know what game mode we're supposed to be entering. And when I say game mode here, I'm referring to Versus or Practice, not Unreal's game mode. So if you go to your base game instance, or whatever you've called your game instance in code, then I've added a new enum. Make sure it is blueprint type. That way we can access it in blueprints because we're going to be setting it there depending on what options we pick. Now, what I've done is I've made an eGameMode type enum class. And I've given all the possibilities for different game modes that I could think of right now. We may do all of these, or, we may have extras or others as well. But for whatever game modes you're going to have, if you're going to have a story mode, versus, or you could even do versus and tag team as separate. You could differentiate this as much or as little as you want. Just differentiate it for what you need things to be different for. So if you need an entire element to be different, like this HUD should be completely different, then you probably want a different game mode for it. Or you can just have a Boolean if you'd like. However, this will allow us to make multiple changes at one time when we select this game mode. Okay, So I've added versus, practice, story, arcade, and online. And I think these are pretty standard for fighting games. There might be like move training and command training and those sort of ones as well, kind of tied with practice, but it could be its own unique one. So feel free to go crazy with that. And then we just need a variable of that type. Very simple. So game mode type, game mode type. Again, make sure it's blueprint read write because we will need to use it in the blueprint. All right. And then once we're done with this, that's all you have to add to the base game instance. What we need to worry about now is setting it in the blueprint, and when we need to set it, and making sure that we reset it if we, exit to the menu or whatever. We need to make sure we set it correctly in there as well. So first things first, I'm going to go to my main menu. And this is where I'm going to add the logic for setting the game mode, because if I click into one of these, versus or practice, I cannot go to the others until I return. So if I click versus, I'm in a versus game mode. If I decide to go back to the main menu, that's fine. But to get to another one, I'll have to switch buttons or switch selections, in which case I can then set the game mode again. So simply setting it when we press this button is more than enough. There's 2 points we want to set it if you follow the series directly. We set it for both if we press the actual button with the mouse, or if we use our custom selection to enter and select that button. However, either way, they are the exact same. So with the mouse controls, it looks like this. All this stuff we had before. We were spawning the character select screen and removing the main menu from the parent. We're still doing that. The only difference we're doing now is we're getting a game instance reference and setting the game mode type. Now, we don't have a game instance reference in here, so we need to make this. If we go to begin play in our main menu, before I do all my listen for input actions for our custom controls on the menu, I do this simple bit of logic. Get game instance. I cast it to the game instance that I know I'm using, which is base game instance. And then I drag off of that and hit promote to variable to make a game instance ref. Then, this is assuming that it's valid, which you could check and make sure first. However, if the game instance is not valid by the time the main menu is up, then there is something wrong, and we'll need to look into further error catching down the road. That should be perfectly fine. There should be no issues with that. The game instance should always load correctly, and again, if it doesn't, then there's a bigger problem anyway. And then once you do that, the way you get this, exactly how I have it, is to drag the game instance ref in, right-click on it, convert to validated get, drag off of it, and set your variable, game mode type. From here, it's very simple. Just select the correct type based off the button you're pressing. Story mode button should go to story. Arcade mode button, arcade. Versus, practice, practice. I don't have it online, but it will be separate. Even if it is part of versus, it will be a different game mode because there are different things that go into online. Okay? And the other thing we need to change it in is the confirm selection. So confirm selection is basically the same thing in terms of the logic, but what we're doing is we manually select this with our, our keyboard or our controller. It's supported by both. Same deal though, exact same deal. After all 4 of these choices, just make sure you choose the correct game mode type and set it off that game instance reference. Okay. All right. That's that. Now let's look at something like the hurtboxes. It's pretty simple. You can probably imagine what it is that we are going to do. But if we go to, let's go to our character blueprint, our base character BP. In our set simple and set complex, I actually forgot to add it to complex now that I'm thinking about it. However, it would be the same for both. Where we set our hurtboxes up and create them and spawn them and attach them to our characters, what we were doing before is after the for loop was completed right here, this first for loop, we were going directly into a set visibility and I was manually toggling this on and off. However, now what we can do is we have to yet again do this to get a game instance reference. So at the start of begin play, before the game mode. It's not required that you do it before the game mode. However, the game instance should be loaded. If for whatever reason it isn't, the game mode will most likely fail as well. So I recommend doing the game instance before the game mode to not cause any issues. And then we use the validated get game instance. We get the game mode type this time. So we go get game mode type. Okay, I'll do it down below just to show you. We switch on it. And it's that simple. And then you just drag these in and perform the logic you want for each one. So this is visibility off, which I have set on versus, and visibility on, which I have set on practice. What you can also do to make this a little bit nicer is, you know, if we want the hurtboxes off for story, arcade, and online, I can drag them all in there to this reroute node. And then the only one that goes down here is the practice one. There we go. I think that is a little bit easier to tell what's going on. Now this is for simple hurtboxes, but really it's the exact same thing for the complex hurtboxes. So if you'd like to see it, it's as simple as this. Do it live for you. There we go. The only difference with the complex hurtboxes is I should use the complex hurtbox array as opposed to the simple. And no joke, it is that simple. There you go. So very easy. And now hurtboxes will only be visible when we expect them to be visible, such as in practice mode. All right, let's close out of those and let's go to the hitbox. We're going to do it in there as well. Not only hurtboxes should be visible, but hitboxes as well should be visible or invisible. Now for this one, I've actually made a function because the type of hitbox can change the logic itself, and we don't want to make this more confusing than it already does to go from a switch to another switch. So in my spawn hitbox function, which we've set up and edited multiple times throughout the series, what we were doing is we had a set, set actor visibility here and here. And it was, on, off, so that I could toggle them on and off manually. Now what I've done is I've made a new function, plus function, called it set visibility based off game mode. And then, what do you know, I do the same logic that you just previously saw. I get a game instance reference, get the game mode type, and then set the visibility of the hitbox display, which is the static mesh of this hitbox actor BP, and set it to be either invisible or visible. You can probably guess this by now, but in begin play for the hitbox actor BP, I cast the base game instance and set a game instance ref. I do it before the game mode, just as I've done in the other classes. And then, if you want to be consistent, you can do this right here. And then everything but practice will leave the hurtboxes and hitboxes invisible. Now make sure you call this new function as opposed to using the set actor visibility here and here. So specifically the hurtbox, I call it. And for all of the hitboxes, all their types, after we've set their world location and before we check collision, that way it can be visible or invisible before collision gets checked. That way it registers more for the player if it's a hit or not. And it's quite literally that simple. We can even do one more since I thought of it on the fly. If we go to where our HUD is, we can go to our base character BP. And in here, we have a HUD reference. And this, and this right here, we set it after we spawn it. So we can either use the base character BP and determine what the game mode is and determine if the input stack on that should be visible, or do it directly on the HUD. If we take a look at our character HUD, or our base game mode HUD in this case, we don't have access to the game instance right off the bat here. So if we want to do it directly on here, then we'd have to make one. Something simple we can do to remedy this is if we make a function in here and call it, set HUD element visibility based on game mode. I know it's a long function name, but we can actually determine what we want to be visible and what we don't in this function. So we could have this function here, and we could take in a widget object if we wanted. So let's do this. Let's make it so we can toggle things from other classes and toggle them on and off. So if we make this a widget, I think a regular widget object reference should be okay. And we'll call this we'll just call it widget, quite frankly. And then we can also receive the game instance if we'd like. That way we don't have to make another variable from the place that we call it. So we can make a base game instance object reference. And I called it game instance reference. And here what we can do is we can do an is valid check. And if this game instance is valid, and this is a type of base game instance, so we know that this has the game mode type. And you guys can probably guess at this point what it is I'm going to do. But I can straighten this connection. I can switch on it. Only if it's valid do we want to do this. Straighten the connection again. And then we could take the widget that was sent in and set visibility as either visible or invisible. Let's see here. Try and keep this as neat as possible. Something like that. And so it is hidden for all of these guys. And visible for practice. And specifically, at this point, we can drag in any widget to this. Now, we don't have to do it this way. If you were only doing this for the input stack, these guys, like I'm planning on doing, then you don't need to make a function for this, but this will allow you to do it at any point. So really what we should do is at the end of begin play, I guess, let's just call it. I think it should be perfectly fine at that point. So at the end of begin play for the character, right now each character is getting their own HUD. Could change for certain situations, especially when we get into online play. We'll probably have one that both players see, but for now it's perfectly fine. So at the end of begin play, what we'll do is we'll get or not really at the end of begin play. Let's do it after we know the HUD reference is set. So once it's set, we should drag off of it. And we should call that set visibility, or what did we call it? We called it the set HUD element. Set HUD element visibility based on game mode. And we can drag in the game instance ref. And for the widget, we can choose whatever we want. So in this case, we're going to want the P1 inputs widget. So I should be able to drag off of this and find P1 inputs, and I can. And so I'll put that in right there. So something like that. And when we do this, now when we play the game, player 2 will still be there at the moment. But player 1's input should not show up on the screen. And you can see they don't, even though I'm controlling it. Player 2 still does. And so all we have to do, as you can probably imagine, is pass in player 2 inputs to get rid of the other one. So if I were to reroute node and reroute node, straighten that connection. And then we need to get P2 inputs. And we can straighten these connections as well. There we go. And we need the target of the HUD reference, which can be found here. I think that's straight. There we go. And at that point, now only when we are in practice should either of the input buffer or input stacks show up in the game. So this is versus. Neither of the players should be showing up, and they are not. So we can have a game, without any of that nonsense if we don't want it. It's very helpful when developing our game, but now we can kind of separate it a little bit more. I didn't have to quit, but either way, let's go back into, if I could press the right button, we'll go back into practice. And now we'll play on the same stage. And this is practice. We can see our hurt boxes. And we can see our input stacks. There we go. And that is how you can make differences in your game, either in your actual combat flow or the design of your HUD or your characters based on the game mode you're playing. So that's a simple video today, guys. I'll leave you with that. Won't take any more of your time, but if you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members and YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I really, really appreciate it, and it helps me out more than you know. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I really will be happy to help you, and it's completely free, so feel free to do it. Sorry, I'm trying to remember all my special commands. There we go. There's that one. And there's that one. And anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got for you, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.